NetsBoy, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play.
What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bring your latest in your It's All Over Brooklyn Nets news. All right. I'm going to do my best to get through this episode without cursing or flipping out, which is going to be very tough. And I can't guarantee I'm not going to do either, but I'm going to try because, let's be honest, this was inevitable. You know, after the way they lost Game 1 and Game 2, I said I thought the Celtics would win in 6. I certainly didn't expect a sweep. But watching halfway through Game 3, it just seemed very clear to me the Nets were not going to win a game in this series. They weren't. They played hard in Game 3 as well. Just couldn't get enough out of anybody, really. Kevin Durant shot better, but only took 10 shots. And it was just one of those games that it just never felt like the Nets had a chance to really win. And so once the Nets were down 0-3, you knew the series was over. And I, like everyone else at that point, I said, this is going to be a sweep. They're not even going to show up in Game 4. But I will say this. I do give credit to the Nets for showing up in Game 4. Game 4 was the hardest I saw the Nets play really the entire series, which was crazy. And finally, Kevin Durant showed up, but it wasn't enough. Kyrie was okay. The other players were solid, but it just simply wasn't enough. The Celtics were just the better team. And throughout the entire series, the Celtics were the better team and clearly better coached and better run and better put together and better everything. So before we go into what this episode is going to be about, we do need to congratulate the Boston Celtics in making me eat my words. If you remember 2 episodes, I said, maybe I'll be eating these words and blah, blah, blah. Celtic fans didn't want that. And sure enough, they did. They completely put me in my place as well as the Brooklyn Nets. And I think, for me, I finally have a chance now to really see just how good Jason Tatum actually is and can be. I mean, in my opinion, Jason Tatum surpassed Kevin Durant. And this was the passing of the torch in this series. To me, Tatum is better than Durant. I think just the way it seemed. Because every time the Nets made a run in that series, and like they had a shot, Tatum was always the one that made the big play, especially in Game 4. Every time the Nets started getting some momentum, Tatum would hit a big 3 or make a big fadeaway jump shot or make a big play. Like, that's just a fact. And I think it's safe to say at this point, in my opinion, that Kevin Durant is not the best player in the world. I personally actually never thought he was, but a lot of people would say that he is. But I'm going to be honest. You can make a case that he's not even top 5. I know that might be blasphemy for Nets fans, but when I think about it, I think Tatum surpassed him. I think Giannis is the best player right now. I think Joel Embiid is right there as well. All right? I think after that, I mean, you got to look at Tatum now and what he just has accomplished right now. And then maybe you could make the argument of, like, Durant is 4, in my opinion. And maybe around Jokic, Durant, Luka Doncic, and LeBron James. Because LeBron James, to me, is still also arguably top 5 player in the league right now. They're all kind of there, competing to be the best in the game. And this is without even Kawhi Leonard, who wasn't healthy all year. So you can even make the case for Kawhi Leonard. And Damian Lillard, who, well, I wouldn't put Damian Lillard that high, to be honest, but he's top 10. So my point is, to me, there's 3 definitive players better than Kevin Durant right now. And I just need them. Giannis, Joel Embiid, and as of right now, Jason Tatum. And I put Durant as 4. That is what I personally believe. And I think that was very evident in this playoff series. against the Celtics. But now, let's get to the whole part of this episode and why, and what we actually all probably want to see. And that is another year of donkeys. Now, if you remember my end of the year episode last year when the Nets lost, I did the similar thing. My top 3 donkeys for the Nets. Because, you know, in a world of athletics and sports and everything going on, we cannot praise success. We must criticize failure. And that is what I'm about to do. Let's forget the fact that I literally just praised the Celtics, pretend that didn't happen. Let's go negative and figure out why on the Nets end did this team get swept in the first round. So let's start with first my honorable mention donkey. I thought hard about this. And there were a couple players that popped into my mind, or a couple people that popped into my mind. I mean, you can make a lot of arguments for a lot of people. I mean, you can make an argument for Sean Marks for making a poor decision in letting James Johnson go to sign Kessler Edwards when clearly Kessler Edwards wasn't ready. You know, you could argue once again that Sean Marks also made mistakes putting this roster together at the beginning of the year, having so many players that did the same thing when he had Bembry and James Johnson and Bruce Brown all playing in the rotation. You know, you could, you know, he's the GM. You can blame him. You know, you can blame Nicholas Claxton, who, as great as he looked, he apparently has no idea how to make a free throw. I mean, Game 4 was a joke. He was 1 for 12 at the free throw line. If he made half of those free throws, it would have been a completely different outcome of that game. So you can blame Nick Claxton. You know, you can blame a whole bunch of people. But my honorable mention blame might shock some people. And that is Kyrie Irving. Now, look, a lot of people blame Kyrie for everything, so it can't be that much of a shock. But I guess coming from me, being that I've always defended Kyrie Irving, a lot of people probably like, NetsBoy actually going to bash Kyrie Irving? The answer is sort of. There is no doubt that from the beginning of the year, this Nets season was destined to fail. As soon as Kyrie Irving said, I am not going to get vaccinated, and I am not going to play, or the Nets then said, then you're not going to play, it completely derailed the beginning of the season and completely ruined the chemistry of this team. Now look, Kyrie Irving, I've said this before, has every right to make every decision that he wants to make. But then you've got to deal with the repercussions of that said decision. Kyrie Irving didn't want to get vaccinated. Okay. The ripple effect gets put in motion. Nets struggle. Well, Nets do pretty well out the gate. James Harden doesn't do so great. Kevin Durant gets hurt. Nets really struggle at that point without Kevin Durant, without Kyrie Irving, and James Harden being a piece of crap. James Harden then gets frustrated, demands a trade to go to the 76ers, gets traded. Okay? Kyrie comes back. He's not quite good enough to help the Nets in the situation. He's a part-time player, in and out of the lineup, all these things. Nets continue to lose. They go from the 2 seed in the East down to the 7, dropped actually all the way down to the 10 seed at one point before battling up to the 7 seed. The Nets bring in Andre Drummond, Seth Curry, and Ben Simmons. The Nets expected to have Ben Simmons. They never got Ben Simmons. So now they basically got players that came in that are not quite good enough to pick up the slack of losing James Harden. And it all comes full circle. Finally, Kyrie's able to come back. After the mandate gets dropped, he comes back. It's like 10 games left in the season. You have a whole new team after trying to figure out chemistry and all these things. And then you just could never figure it out, even when Durant got back. And you're literally trying to learn on the fly with 10 games to go. And the basketball gods will never let that happen. I don't care how talented you are. You can never piece together a championship team in 10 or 15 games. You just can't. You just can't. So everything was put in motion from the time Kyrie Irving decided not to get vaccinated. And I don't want to call him a donkey for not getting vaccinated because it's his right, but you have to deal with the consequences. So my honorable mention donkey is Kyrie Irving for putting all of this in motion, for simply not getting vaccinated, and making everything a lot harder on this Nets team than it needed to be. honorable mention. But he's my honorable mention because, as I said, I don't really think he did anything, wrong, in the sense of just, not wanting to get the vaccine. And he has every right to do that. It's just unfortunate of the fallout that happened to it. But so he's also the honorable mention because there are still other factors that caused this Nets team to get swept in the first round. So now let's go to my number 3 donkey. And that is, well, this one shouldn't shock anyone. James Harden. That's right, James Harden. Come on now. You knew NetsBoy was going to figure out a way to blame him. Of course I blame James Harden. I blame him more than Kyrie Irving. I blame him more than a lot of people, okay? This was a guy who forced his way to Brooklyn. He forced his way. As much as we can argue about Kyrie Irving putting the failure in motion by not getting vaccinated, James Harden put the failure in motion wanting to get traded to the Nets 2 years ago because he insisted and he wanted it. And so what does Sean Marks do? He got him. But to get James Harden, he had to forfeit Jared Allen and Karis LeVert as the 2 main players. 2 players that, by the way, if you were to plug into this team, forget the acquisitions that the Nets made via the James Harden trade. Forget Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, and Andre Drummond. If you just have Jared Allen and Karis LeVert plugged onto this team with the other moves they made, with the development of Claxton, the signing of Patty Mills, Bruce Brown coming out and showing how great he is, this Nets team would have easily won. Jared Allen would have made a world of difference. Imagine a center duo of Jared Allen and Nicholas Claxton. And imagine, Karis LeVert coming off the bench. I mean, who knows what would have happened with Dinwiddie, but that's all beside the point. Like, everything was put in motion with James Harden insisting to come to the Nets. He then proceeds to come to the Nets, out of shape, fat, constantly gets hurt, and then starts blaming everyone else. Oh, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up to be the guy. Kyrie, you're not vaccinated. You're not playing enough. You're letting the team down. Oh, no, Kevin Durant's hurt. Oh, man, I don't want to be here. I don't like this one bit. Who does that? I mean, you made such a big fuss to come to this team, and then you make such a big fuss to get out. And that also put all the wheels in motion. Once James Harden wanted out, it completely screwed up the chemistry even more. As bad as it was with Kyrie not actually playing, at the time, he was at least still practicing with them. So there was still some team, chemistry being built during practices. But once James Harden insisted on getting traded and completely bailed on this Nets team, it brought in 3 new players that had to get completely acclimated with the entire team. And it just really screwed everything up. And also, you can make the argument yet again, if James Harden just stayed put and just said, let me stick through it and grind it out, this Nets team also wouldn't have got swept because when KD came back from the injury and Kyrie was able to play full time, with James Harden, this Nets team would have looked amazing. I know it. Just like they did last year when all 3 of them played. When all 3 of them played, they were 6-1. Remember, they beat the Celtics last year in 5 games, and then they won the first 2 games of against the Bucks when they were all healthy. 6-1. This would have been a completely different situation. But James Harden had to be a moron and had to be selfish and had to be a fat piece of crap and had to just destroy the Nets even more. So James Harden is my number 3 donkey. That's right, James. You suck. I hate your guts. I always have. You are a donkey. You get another one. So there. James Harden, the number 3 donkey. But he's only number 3. Because at the end of the day, he was not there during the playoffs, and he was off the team. And it's hard to blame somebody who's not actually there causing the team to get swept. So that's why he's number 3. Trust me, I would argue he could be number 1 because I hate him so much. But rationally, he is number 3. So my number 2 donkey for the Nets. This is, I guess, not really a shock when you think about it, but it's a shock just in general, I guess, overall. That's Kevin Durant. Look, Kevin Durant had one of the worst playoff series I think any superstar has had in a long time. I mean, he just looked completely outmatched. He kept turning the ball over, he kept making dumb shots, and he just seemed completely out of it. And it wasn't until game 4 where he finally kind of figured it out and scored 39 points. I mean, in the first 3 games, he had 19 made field goal attempts and 17 turnovers. He just looked lost. He kept turning the ball over. He kept making dumb plays. He wasn't contributing defensively or on the boards like he needed to do. He was just getting frustrated, and it was just a disaster. And we established earlier on this year that without Kevin Durant, this Nets team can't win a championship. You cannot have your star player play as bad as Kevin Durant did and expect to win. You can't. And like I just touched upon, it wasn't just he wasn't scoring. He wasn't even doing the little things. He wasn't getting rebounds. He only had average 4 or 5 rebounds a game. He wasn't blocking shots. He wasn't playing good defense. He wasn't even getting that many assists. He just kept turning the ball over and just seemed completely lost. It's unbelievable. I've never seen Durant like that. I don't think anyone has. But you cannot deny the fact that he was the biggest on-the-court reason why they lost. There's of all the on-the-court reasons, Kevin Durant was the biggest reason. He played the worst I've ever seen. You could argue Kyrie Irving disappeared in Game 2 and Game 3, but at the same time, we know that happens from Kyrie. We don't expect that from Kevin Durant. A bad game by Kevin Durant is still Kevin Durant's score. It's like what he did in Game 2 when he had 29 points, even though he had a terrible shooting percentage. A bad game by Kevin Durant is still 20, 25 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and maybe 4 turnovers. He wasn't even that. He was awful. And you just can't have that. He's your superstar. He's your face of your franchise. Can't be playing like that. So there's no doubt that he was a big reason, if not the reason on the court why they lost. So that is why Kevin Durant, the supposed to be savior of the Brooklyn Nets, you, my friend, are my number 2 donkey. Now, that takes me to my number 1 donkey. Hopefully, I won't rant on too much about this and this video becomes 30 minutes. We're at nearing the 18-minute mark, and I don't like these episodes going beyond 20 minutes, though they always do, because I just keep ranting and ranting and ranting and blah, blah, blah. But sometimes some things have to be said. So I'm going to try to keep this rant under 5 minutes as best as I can. My number 1 donkey, for the 2nd consecutive year of being the number 1 donkey, should be no surprise, Steve frickin' Nash. Where to begin? I have never seen a coach be so outcoached by anyone in the history of basketball. I have never seen a coach who's supposed to be a great basketball mind seem so clueless on what to do in what situation. I have never seen a coach do less with more than Steve Nash. He has 2 of the greatest players in the history of the game today, 2 of the best offensive players. He has an elite rebounder. He has one of the 2 great 45 or better percent three-point shooters. He has all this talent. He's got all former All-Stars and all these players at his disposal. And he couldn't even figure out how to win one damn game. He couldn't figure out how to get a rotation down. He couldn't figure out how to see what the Celtics were doing and make the adjustments. I have never seen anything so embarrassing in my life than this guy's coaching performance. And look, did he do a good job when it came to dealing with all the off-the-court issues, the Kyrie stuff, the James Harden stuff, the Ben Simmons? Yes, he did. Is he a good, guy and someone who's good at dealing with the players? Yes, he's very good at dealing with the players. But he's not a good head coach. The only thing he did that I liked was when he took Andre Drummond out of the rotation and went with Blake Griffin. Because Blake Griffin provided energy and a better type of, presence on the defensive end. I actually love that he did that. Because what did he have to lose at that point? They're only down 2-0. It happened in Game 3. It was like the highlight of the series. Blake Griffin comes in, everyone starts cheering. I think Steve Nash did a good job on that. That was the best coaching decision he made. I would have done something different. I would have actually put LaMarcus Aldridge in, because even though he's not as good defensively and is not as athletic as Blake, he would have helped the Nets on the offensive end, being a third option to help, reduce the defensive, focus on Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. But, whatever. But at least he tried. But it still didn't work. And nothing worked because nothing actually happened. It doesn't make sense. I talked about this in my last episode. How do you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and not put the two of them in a pick and roll? How do you have Seth Curry and Patty Mills and not try to get plays to get them open threes? How can you see what the defense is doing to Kevin Durant, focusing all their efforts on him? How can you possibly say the best course of action is to just do an isolation? Are you thinking with the mindset, oh, well, they do iso ball when the double team comes, Kevin Durant will make the right play and pass? That hadn't happened the entire game. That's too simple-minded thinking. That's too simple to work. All right? Yeah, that's like the basic basketball philosophy is if a team is throwing double teams at you, you need to isolate and load up on one side and, get a player who's open. But that's technically not what the Celtics were doing. They were switching long body after long body and getting physical with Durant every time Durant caught the ball. He needed to make other adjustments, and he never did. Adjustments that I, an everyday fan, could see needed to be done. This is unbelievable because last year he cost them, in my opinion, going with a six-man rotation, not knowing who to play and when, going to a stupid small ball lineup. And this year he did it again. And by the way, speaking of small ball, you cannot go to a Dragic, Kyrie Irving, and Seth Curry lineup at any point. You can't play three guys under 6'3". Not against the Celtics. Not against a team where the shortest guy on the Celtics is Marcus Smart, who's 6'4". So, what kind of logic is that? And every time that lineup was in, the Celtics focused on the switch and had their either Tatum or Brown or Horford, or even Grant Williams, apparently, body up the smaller player and score with ease. It's just dumb. You literally released James Johnson to have Kessler Edwards on this roster. You had to have played him. He's the only other forward on this roster who could have really helped. Or do what I just said before, play Blake Griffin or Aldridge together with Claxton, because Claxton can switch and play the 4 or 3 defensively and go to this stone, which would have helped prevent the mismatches. So how come I can't figure this out, but a professional basketball coach can? Because he's Steve, the biggest donkey in the history of the Nets, Nash. Steve Nash, once again, cost the Nets. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care about all the other distractions. I don't care about the Kyrie things, the James Harden, how bad Durant played, which, by the way, I said this before. If Steve Nash was a real coach, he would have figured out ways to help Kevin Durant instead of just giving him the ball and just saying, oh, come on, Kevin, you can figure it out. Bail my ass out because I'm an idiot. It's unbelievable. Any other coach would have at least made the adjustments, and if I guarantee you, if you grab any of the other 29 head coaches in the NBA and replace them with Steve Nash, this series is 2-2 right now. I firmly believe that. Instead, they got swept because Steve, you, once again, are the number one donkey for the Brooklyn Nets. That sounds like Chewbacca is hanging out with a donkey. But anyway, there you have it. My top 3 donkeys and the end of a disastrous season that was this Brooklyn Nets. Let me know what you guys think about everything. What you guys think about my donkeys, my honorable mentions, the whole disaster that was the sweep, this whole year summarized and everything like that. It was just a complete nightmare. And you know what? I'm glad it's finally over. All right, it's over. It's baseball season. It's time for me to focus on my Yankees. I'm just done. I'm done. So this is the official end of this year of NetsBoy. What a terrible way to end it. But what can you do when you got Steve Nash as your coach? I hope he gets fired. He probably won't. The word is that Joe Asai and Kevin Durant and everyone is happy with Steve Nash. So they're probably just going to run it back and have the same exact team. Like, I feel like that's what's going to happen. I think the Nets' philosophy is going to be, well, we didn't have Joe Harris for most of the year. We didn't have Ben Simmons. If we had those two guys and bring back most of the players we have back, we're going to be a championship team. And you know what? That actually might be true. But with Steve Nash as your coach, it's going to be a stretch for this team to win a championship, even if what they're hoping would happen would happen. But we'll talk about that another time. All right? My next NetsBoy episode will be the unofficial beginning of the new NetsBoy season, which will probably be once the NBA Finals are over and we're moving towards the NBA Draft. That's usually how I start things off. A new beginning, a new opportunity for the Nets to try to win a championship. I thought this was going to be my last year. I was feeling that with everything that's going on with me personally and this and that. But I can't end like this. I can't end with a sweep. I gotta end on a higher note than this before I stop doing these NetsBoy episodes. So congratulations, Nets. You caused me to do one more full year of NetsBoy, despite how busy I always am. But can't end like this. So that will be my next NetsBoy episode. So keep an eye on it sometime in June when we hear some rumors after the NBA Finals and the draft is coming up. All right, shut up, NetsBoy. Thank you, everybody, again, for a disappointing year, even though it's not your fault. But thank you, Nets, for a disappointing year. Thanks, everyone, for staying with me and subscribing and liking and sharing these videos. Until the next NetsBoy episode, this is NetsBoy. One more time with the donkeys. And signing off.
When